good morning or good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon, yes. Please go ahead, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time and the invitation. Again, good morning. It is morning here in Chicago, in the United States, where I'm speaking to you from. Good afternoon to everyone in Al Riyadh. I'm here to talk to you today about the U.S. approach to a pernicious, persistent, and evergreen problem. Those who conspire to attack public procurement and get a larger piece of the pie, as we say here, than they're entitled to. I'm here to talk about the U.S. approach, what we've done, what's worked for us, and what you in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia may consider. As always, our experiences, our choices, were dictated by our specific context and needs. The approach you take will necessarily need to be tailored and be different. Next slide, please. But before I discuss what we did, let me pause for a moment and talk about the why. The why is large. It is the cost of collusion. And by collusion here, I mean two or more competitors conspiring, often in secret, to rig tenders or bids, to deprive the government of the benefits of competition when the government goes into the market to buy goods or services. So what are those benefits of competition in a free market that's not impacted by collusion and conspiracy? A competitive market is one where sellers cut prices to get the business, where sellers make higher quality products or offer higher quality services. And in a perfect competitive market, the customer, the government, that's us, that's you, you'll get all of those things. But when a market is beset by collusion, where competitors want to limit competition to make more money, the result is that victims are overcharged and defrauded. And this causes a direct loss to the agencies and ministries and departments that are making the purchases. And those are direct losses that are passed on to those who fund agencies, ministries, and departments. Taxpayers. It is a literal collusion tax. Bidding processes, the tender process in the public procurement context is particularly vulnerable to collusion, the rigging of tenders, for a number of reasons. There's something about government spending on goods and services. Actually, there are multiple things. One, the sheer monetary value of government projects presents an enticing opportunity for contractors, for vendors to cheat in order to win. There's just so much money at play. Two, the regulatory requirements governing procurement procedures, at least in the United States, can make the process predictable and thus subject to manipulation through collusion. When you know when purchases are going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years, it is easy to set things in place over the next 3 to 5 years with your competitors. In the US, many agencies, departments, or ministries have repetitive or regularly scheduled purchases. In our country, there are often relatively few qualified sellers for a given project, given that the government often requires specialized goods or services, or has pre-clearance or pre-qualification Another factor, at least in the US, rush or emergency projects often arise in government procurement. In our context, disaster relief projects. Our Gulf Coast surrounding the Gulf of Mexico every year suffers from hurricanes. And there is quite a bit of spending that happens to recover from hurricanes every year. And that spending happens in a very rushed fashion, as it must, to recover. But when there is a rush or emergency, the guardrails in place often go down. Another factor, our experience has shown us, at least in the United States, certain areas, including construction, infrastructure, and overseas contingency operations, tend to be vulnerable. Finally, a final reason the government is vulnerable, that large volume, that large amount of money spent creates monitoring difficulties. The pot is just so large, it is difficult to keep track of it all. Finally, the cost of collusion, the harm. The massive amount of money flowing from the government to the contractors to purchase a broad array of goods and services, it really cannot be overstated. In the United States, in fiscal year 2019, the US government, the federal government, not the 50 states, spent more than $586 billion on contracts for goods and services. And if we lose even a fraction of this money to illegal conduct, it is very, very costly. It's hard to get a handle on how much is really at risk. But the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, has estimated that around the world that the eliminating bid rigging of tenders and other collusion in the procurement process could help reduce procurement costs by 20% or more. That's the collusion tax, 20%. The impact on the bottom line can be significant. So taking that 20% number and applying it to that $586 billion of US government spend I mentioned just a moment ago, that's $117 billion at risk from bid rigging and other forms of collusion. And you can think about what that would look like in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Finally, as it pertains to the harm, these schemes tend to be pernicious, like a cancer. They truly are. They linger, they spread, they're lengthy in time and effect, and they can often spread to other goods and services. Next slide, please. Or to put it more succinctly and more colorfully, as a court here in the United States recently did. You see this quote up on the screen. Like bears to honey, white-collar criminals are drawn to billion-dollar government programs. And in my experience, in our collective experience at the U.S. Department of Justice, that is very true. Next slide. This led us in the United States at the Department of Justice to launch something called the Procurement Collusion Strike Force, or the PCSF. We launched the PCSF in November of 2019. It's an interagency partnership. It's not just the Department of Justice and not just our antitrust division, which is focused on collusion, rigging of tenders, and other associated conduct and activity, but truly a whole of government approach to this problem. It's a partnership consisting of the Antitrust Division, 22 U.S. attorneys' offices, which are local federal prosecutors' offices located throughout the country, and investigators, special agents, analysts from the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and 6 federal offices of Inspector General. And in the United States, offices of Inspector General are federal agents, special agents who focus on particular ministries or subject areas. Our overall concept is that this is a strategic partnership of prosecutors and agents, working together to leverage our combined expertise and capacity so that we can better detect, investigate, and prosecute these crimes, antitrust crimes, competition crimes, and related criminal schemes that affect government procurement, grant and program funding at all levels of government. And in our context, because of our federal system, that means federal, state, and local. Our goals, our objectives are twofold. The first objective is to deter the crimes before they happen. We are law enforcers, so of course our first goal is deterrence. How do we achieve deterrence? One of the ways is by engaging in outreach training and education. And that includes meeting with what we call the buy side, meeting with the procurement officials to help them understand that they are at risk, that these schemes do target them in their spending, and to help them be aware of what the red flags are so that they can make a report and make a call when they see them. We also engage in outreach training to what we call the sell side. Those are the contractors themselves, their trade associations, and the lawyers for each, in order to educate them about the risks, about what could happen. And in our system, these are crimes, there are criminal penalties, and for individuals, there are incarceration is a real possibility. Our second objective is to facilitate more effective detection, investigation, and prosecution. One important aspect of enhanced detection is marshaling and using data analytics. In the United States, when the federal government goes out to market to buy goods and buy various goods, we collect massive amounts of data. In that data, there is a tremendous amount of information that can be useful to proactively detect schemes, because it's more than just pricing information. It's all the other indicia of collusion and collaboration among competitors. Next slide, please. So you'll see on the screen before you a map of the United States. Each star represents where we have our 22 teams or squads located. They're located throughout the United States. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a list of our partners. We are a nationwide and in some ways international strike force. To bring together all the different areas of expertise, each one of those stars has a team or squad, and you'll have a specialist from the antitrust division, a prosecutor who works these antitrust violations every single day. You'll have another prosecutor, an assistant United States attorney from a local office where each of those stars is, and federal agents from the FBI, and each one of the offices of Inspector General you see on the right-hand side. But we have set up our system, we have set up our strike force to be flexible and nimble, because, as we say, one size doesn't fit all. The concerns and the potential crimes that are occurring in a state like Texas are different than those in California. So each of our teams can have additional agents, analysts, and investigators from different departments or ministries focusing on other areas where there are particular vulnerabilities. And this flexibility has allowed us to conduct additional outreach and training and detect schemes, potential schemes, where we otherwise would not have been able to. Next slide, please. Now, when we are in our second objective, detection, investigation, and prosecution, we are living our mandate. And our mandate is all conduct that undermines or distorts perverts or subverts competition in the procurement process. Whether that includes, as you'll see in the center of the schematic in front of you, the classic antitrust or competition crimes, such as bid rigging, price fixing, and market allocation, as well as any fraud schemes or conspiracies that target the procurement process, or false statements pertaining to the procurement process. In the United States, to make a false statement to the federal government that is material is a crime. It is a crime to launder money. And we can and we do discover schemes to launder money in relation to procurement crimes, or to pay kickbacks. A kickback is one way of ensuring payment goes from one competitor to another. That's in the private sector. A related concept, something we do investigate and do charge, and I'll discuss this in a moment, would be bribes to public officials. And then the various flavors and categories of fraud: mail or wire fraud, bank fraud, tax fraud. Next slide, please. We've brought a number of cases since our inception in fall of 2019. And we have many more investigations that are going to be reaching decision points shortly. I'll talk about the Caltrans investigation, which has yielded some public charges. I'm free to talk about those. I wanted to talk about Caltrans because in speaking with the conference organizers and some of the thoughts they're having, I thought this investigation and the subject matter was particularly interesting. Caltrans is the California Department of Transportation. The state of California has its own departments or ministries, one of which is the Department of Transportation. The California Department of Transportation is responsible for, among many other things, the building and maintenance of roads, highways, public transportation in the public way, the public roadways throughout the state of California. And if you are in any way familiar with a map of the United States, you know the state of California is very large, and there are lots and lots of roadways. In April of this year, a former employee of the California Department of Transportation pleaded guilty. He was charged with crimes, and he pleaded guilty. He said, "I did it, I admit it, you've got me." What did he plead guilty to? He pleaded guilty to conspiring with contractors, those who provide the goods and services to the state of California. He pleaded guilty for conspiring with them to rig the tenders on various government contracts. He also pleaded guilty to bribery concerning programs receiving federal funds. So what specifically did this state employee do? Well, he helped set up a scheme where the contractors would rotate and decide in advance who would win particular jobs. And then they would submit bids in accordance with that agreement, including the winning bidder submitting the lowest bid, and the other bidders submitting what they are called complimentary, sham, or dummy bids at higher and inflated prices. That's the classic competition conspiracy. But our state employee here wasn't done. He also had an agreement and a scheme set up where he demanded what was called a quote-unquote sales commission. That's really another word for bribe. He had an agreement where he demanded and received 10% or more of the value of contracts, either in cash or other forms of payment like wine, automobiles, and home construction and improvements on other pieces of property. That cash you see in the photo, though, that stack of US currency, that is cash that was seized and forfeited when US law enforcement agents executed a search warrant at this former employee's home. They discovered cash in a safe. And under our system of laws, because that is tied back to the crime and connected to it, those are proceeds of the crime, and the government can take that back. That's money to which this employee was not entitled. This is in many ways a classic case. There's nothing novel. There's nothing particularly sophisticated about this. These kinds of schemes have been going on for at least a century. And in my hometown of Chicago, which if you know anything about Chicago other than Al Capone or Michael Jordan, you may know it has a reputation for corruption, and it's a reputation well earned. These sorts of schemes are frequently caught, detected, investigated, and prosecuted. I want to leave you today with some resources. These are public resources we make available to the general public, to our law enforcement partners, to our partners in the procurement agencies who make the purchases. They include an online presence where people can learn more, watch a basic training video, get very simple explanations of what the offenses are, and report violations. We also have prepared and provided a short, roughly five-page article written in the style of a magazine article about what the classic competition schemes look like. We also have something we call an antitrust primer for federal law enforcement personnel. It dives a little deeper into some of the offenses, but it's also publicly available for those who want to learn more. The last thing I'll leave you with is, as you're thinking about ways to detect, deter, combat, and engage with your community of stakeholders there, one thing we've found at the Department of Justice is that the seal you see behind me, the name of the agency, the ministry I work for, is often enough to get me the meeting. It's often enough to get me in the door to get the training, get my colleagues in there to train people. But you have to start by once you are in the door and in the room with the people you're trying to train and provide outreach to, and get to really care about this topic, you have to start by helping them understand the importance. And so I always like to focus on the costs of collusion. That second slide you saw, and I will tailor it and change it based upon the audience. But one of the first things I do, I will not rely just upon the seal behind me. That is not going to be enough. I want to make them understand that this is important, and it is something that they really need to focus on because they are targets. So with that, those are my prepared remarks, and I want to thank you for inviting me, and I wish you all the best for a good conference.